Well, very warm welcome this morning to all 5 of our FEC campuses. If you haven't met me yet, my name's James. I'm one of the pastors here, and I'd love to get to know you better if we get a chance to talk afterwards. It is a special weekend. We've been talking about it already, a vision weekend, when we get the chance to look back at God's kindness and graciousness to us in the past year, and also to stare a little bit into the future and wonder, what is next? Where are we all going? What are we up to? What are we trying to do? There's a story in the Old Testament, the first part of our Bibles, that I think has real significance for us this weekend. And so I'm going to read it to you in a little bit and we'll think about it. But to do that, I got to take you on a bit of a brief detour. So if you hang in with me for 5 minutes, it'll be okay. The story in the Bible, not quite at the start, but close to it, you hear about one family, a man called Jacob. And he had a whole load of kids, and everything was going wrong. There was a famine, and one of his sons was already living down there. His brothers had sold him off as a slave. His name's Joseph, the one with the stripy coat, if you've seen the musical about the whole thing. Joseph gets promoted eventually from slave to prime minister because he's got a great plan how to deal with a famine that's coming along and providing food for people for years where they'd be struggling otherwise. It was a plan that worked well, and he saved hundreds of thousands of lives. But that was all a long time ago. Generations have come, generations have gone. Nobody really cared about Joseph anymore. And what was just one family has now grown and grown to become a very large and visible minority group in Egyptian society. The Egyptians get tired of them. Too many people coming in. And so they enslaved them. Till God sent one person, a man called Moses, to be their deliverer. And at the beginning of this year, we were telling some of the story of Moses in our series that we called Overcoming. If you know the story, it gets quite exciting. There's 10 plagues. There's the Passover, the Exodus, going through the Red Sea, getting into the wilderness, meeting God there, and eventually a 40-year journey through the wilderness towards the desert places. Moses is getting old. He won't actually get to the promised land with them. The end of his journey has been pretty near. And things are transferring in a sense. Leadership is transferring from Moses to one of his helpers, one of his stand-ins, a man called Joshua. Here's Joshua's story. He served as Moses' right hand during the whole time of the Exodus from slavery. He was a military guy. He could organize things to a T. But he also was with Moses when Moses ascended Mount Sinai to receive the 10 Commandments from God. And he was present there because Joshua was a man whose heart was filled with faith. When they were wandering around and getting ready for their invasion, they picked 12 spies to go and have a look around. Joshua is one of those spies. If you remember the song from Sunday school where 12 men went to spy in Canaan, 10 were bad and 2 were good. It's really hard to get all that right, especially if you're shaky as I am. Joshua was one of the 2 good spies with his friend Caleb. But eventually he was commissioned to be Moses' divinely chosen successor. He would lead them into Canaan. And here they are at the edge of the promised land, ready to move in. Everything's good to go. The first city they're going to encounter when they move along is a city called Jericho that's still there today. Jericho really is an oasis in a fairly barren landscape. The high Judean desert, there's not a lot going on there, but there is Jericho. And it's a beautiful place. There's all sorts of things going on. It's way too hot in the summer, and it's beautifully warm in the winter. But one of the things that's interesting about Jericho is the name. It sort of means palm trees or city of palms because there were lots of them growing there. You could think of it kind of as the Palm Springs of the ancient world. And it's there that something's going to happen. This is going to be Joshua's first big leadership test. And so he decides to get the best intel he can. After all, he was James Bond years before when he went spying. And so he picks 2 new spies to go and have a look around for him. What are the strengths and weaknesses of the city? Where are the entry points? What could we do? What strategy do we need to make sure that we win? Which is unusual, really. Because as you read the story, you'll come to realize God's plan for them wasn't to stage a big invasion. God's plan was for them that the worship team would lead them around and they'd just keep walking around the city walls and the walls would fall down. Band practice would have been more useful than sending spies, but that's what he did. I wonder why he did it, though. Did he need a little bit more reassurance than just God's plan? Did he need a bit more to convince him than just God's promises to him? Hard to say, really. But look where it goes. It gets complex. Do you ever find yourself there, wanting something more from God? He's not explained himself enough. He's not made it clear enough. If only you could do a sign, give us a sign. Is this really what you want, Lord? Some reassurance. Sometimes I feel like that. A little bit of reassurance wouldn't hurt God. Please, if you get the time. All is going well, except Joshua needed more. And this is where we read, chapter 2, verse 1. Joshua, son of Nun, sent 2 men secretly from Shittim as spies, saying, "Go, view the land, especially Jericho." So they went and entered the house of a prostitute whose name was Rahab, and spent the night there. The king of Jericho was told, "Some Israelites have come here tonight to search out the land." Then the king of Jericho sent orders to Rahab, "Bring out the men who have come to you, who entered your house, for they have come to search out the whole land." So much for the undercover work. The spies are spied in their first day there. The king of Jericho's got a good counterintelligence program, it seems. He knows they're there, and he's got them trapped. He locks up the city gates, he's manned the walls, and they're caught like mice in a trap. He just needs to get hold of them. And where do we find the guys hanging out, trying to hide? If it was Amsterdam, they'd call it the red light district, Rahab's place. Strangers are her trade. Names are not usually exchanged, at least not your real one. Maybe it's kind of like the Wild West. The saloon and the hotel are the same place. I don't know. Maybe it was the only place they could secretly go and spend the night. Still, it is quite an unusual place to find 2 nice Jewish boys, isn't it? Their lives were not the only thing they were in danger of losing that night. The enemy soldiers show up at her house, looking for spies, and an escape plan comes together. Rahab distracts the guards. "Hello, boys," while they climb out the window and make a run for it. Plans are made, everything's ready. Joshua feels he's good to go until the commander shows up. That's the backstory. That's just what's happened. But the interesting part that has real relevance for us today, we find in chapter 5, beginning at verse 13. This is what I want us to pay attention to. Once when Joshua was by Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing before him with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua went to him and said, "Are you one of us or one of our adversaries?" He replied, "Neither, but as commander of the army of the Lord I have now come." And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshipped, and he said to him, "What do you command your servant, my Lord?" The commander of the army of the Lord said to Joshua, "Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place where you stand is holy." And Joshua did so. Something gets Joshua's attention. They still haven't moved from their holding position, ready to go to Jericho, but something's got his attention. And when something gets our attention, it usually gets us. Joshua looks up. Literally in Hebrew, he lifts up his eyes and has a look around. I think sometimes we could do with learning that lesson, to be honest, lifting up our eyes. We look down all the time, staring at screens, looking to see what's there. We struggle at times to pay attention. Past few weeks I've been doing this just out of curiosity, hopefully not too creepy, but watching what people do. In restaurants, they don't talk, they stare. At the airport, you get to your gate early and we stare. Sitting on a plane, we stare. I watch people in here that I work with and that come visiting. We walk down the stairs, taking our lives in our hands, staring. Everybody's looking down. Nobody ever looks up. Is that you? I'm guilty as charged. We stare down a lot of the time. Grocery stores, walking in the street, at home, at church, wherever. We look at our screens, and guess what? Whatever gets your attention gets you. Whatever gets your attention gets you. We're not just staring at screens, we're being discipled by them. We're actually being shaped by them, shaped by our technology and our social media. Our attention span is dropping. Our ability to hold contrary views and try to look at a variety of opinions is disappearing. Our presence with family or friends is diminished because we're not very interactive anymore. Our awareness of God's presence in our lives is also impacted. We're not sure where He is. We are very easily distracted and being discipled by our technology. But here we see Joshua. Joshua saw, and most of our translations don't put the full phrasing in there, but Joshua saw and lifted up his eyes and beheld. We sometimes say lo and behold, but we don't use that word very often. But Joshua sees something unusual, and the repetition of verbs is there for a reason. He sees this guy, and it's hard to say who he is or what he wants. He's impressive. He's got a huge sword, and he seems to know what he's going to do with it. Who is this person? Lots of opinions about that. Is it what people would call a theophany, like a vision of God that he sees? Or is it a Christophany, a vision of Jesus? Is he really an angel, or is it just a man? Who knows? But we're not really too sure. But Joshua saw. He beheld this person. And it feels as though there's something unique between what we normally can't see and what we can see is taking place here. And with real courage, Joshua goes up to this guy. The guy's got a big sword, and he doesn't look as though he knows how to use it. Joshua goes to him. In other words, he gets right up in his face. And Joshua asks the obvious question, whose side are you on, my man? Are you with them or are you with us? It's a fairly straightforward question. It's a binary choice. You're either for us or against us. Say what you're up to. There are no casual observers. There's nowhere to hide. It's life or death. This is how we see our politicians behaving these days. It's all one or the other. There's no nuance. There's no conversation. Doesn't matter which party you support. It's chaotic. We live in this binary world where everything has to go one way or the other, and it's impacting our own personal relationships as we learn to live life with each other like that. Everything gets turned into a zero-sum game. And Joshua's question seems very straightforward. Whose side are you on? But the reply was quite unexpected. The man didn't come to take sides. He came to take charge. He didn't come to take sides. He came to take charge. He's the commander of the army of the Lord. The issue is not whose side is he on. The real issue in question at hand is whose side is Joshua on? Is Joshua going to be on God's side? He's asked the wrong question. I do that very often with the Lord, ask the wrong question. I want to know how it's going to work out for me, how it's going to be for my family, what things are going to happen next. Help me with this, help me with that. Please, if you could, that would be really great. Thank you very much. And asking the wrong question, missing out on what he's actually trying to say to me or to us. Maybe that's you too. We figure it out very, very slowly. But the commander had a message for Joshua from God. And the next thing we see Joshua do, he falls down. He's laying in the dirt, face first, prostrate on the ground. You see, before the walls of Jericho were ever going to topple down and fall down, Joshua was going to have to fall down. Before the walls would fall, Joshua needed to fall. It's a question of surrender. Surrender of his being in charge, surrender of self-will. Maybe for us it's the surrender of autonomy. The surrender of having the very last word all the time. The surrender of trying to live life independently of God. The surrender of thinking I can be in charge. The surrender of me, my, and mine. The surrender and consecration of my life entirely to God and His purposes. What do you want to do with me? The answer is yes, in advance. Surrender. This moment of surrender, whether it's for Joshua or for us, it opens us up to a lifetime of learning to surrender all that we have and everything that we are to Jesus Himself. The commander of the army of the Lord was there, not to help, but to take over. And Joshua heard, and he surrendered. You see, it was not Joshua's battle. It would always be the Lord's battle. The battle always belongs to Him. The commander was there to make sure Joshua began to understand this. And Joshua heard and surrendered. It's what we mean when we talk about sanctification in church. It's a big word, but it really just means about becoming more and more like Jesus. It's being changed from the inside out, so the rest of us looking at the outside can begin to see what's different about you in our mannerisms, in our speech, in the things we value most. It's being changed so that we learn to love what God loves, and we learn to love the way God loves. Our hearts being shaped and molded by Him to resemble Jesus. Centuries later, the Apostle Paul would write these words in Romans 12. I appeal to you, therefore, brothers and sisters, on the basis of God's mercy, to present yourselves, your bodies, as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your reasonable worship. That's surrender. God's purpose is that we actually start living holy lives, lives devoted to Him, that we actually have a relationship with Jesus that begins to shape us and changes us. Some of us figure that out fairly quickly when we begin a journey with Jesus. Somehow we get it. Many of us, I think, probably most of us, take a little longer, and that's okay because it's not a race. Our relationship with Jesus very often resembles relationships we have with our friends. They're up, they're down, they're up, they're down. Jesus, he's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Us, not quite so much at times. That's why I think sometimes we have a breakthrough moment in our journey with Jesus. He's been doing stuff with us and for us, and then we kind of get distracted and we're looking down and not looking up. And then all of a sudden there's this breakthrough moment and we get our hearts attuned to what God is saying to us again, but then we get distracted and we're staring at our phones some more. And we're doing this, and I got to be careful I don't fall off the edge of this platform. My dad did that several months ago and broke his femur. It was not a good thing, but the breakthrough moments come. Because if you've said yes to Jesus, he already lives in your heart. He already lives with you by his Holy Spirit. It's not more Jesus that you actually need, but for us it's being more of ourselves given to Jesus. We need sanctifying power to come and change us as we consecrate, as we surrender everything that we know of ourselves to him. In fact, Paul's prayer about surrender like this in 1 Thessalonians reads like this: "May the God of peace himself sanctify you entirely, and may your spirit and soul and body be kept sound and blameless at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. The one who calls you is faithful, and he will do this." Sanctified, made holy, made like Jesus, entirely, completely holy, your whole self, spirit, soul, and body. Every aspect of my life surrendered to God, not just the coming to church on a Sunday morning part of life, not just the reading the Bible and praying during the week or going to my small group or something like that, but every aspect of what my life is, my relationships, my thoughts, my hobbies, my aspirations, my family, my work, my sexuality, my entertainment, all of it surrendered to God completely. Would you be ready to pray like that? To surrender everything to Jesus? Joshua looks up, then he falls down. And then the commander has another word for him. Shoes off. Why? Holy ground, shoes off. When Moses was up getting the 10 Commandments in Mount Sinai, God said that to him: this is holy ground, shoes off. And I think it's kind of unusual saying it to Joshua because Joshua's waiting for some battle orders. There's a war about to start. And nobody goes into battle without their shoes on. It's a ridiculous concept to think you're going to go to a big fight without your boots. But there's a big lesson here for us, I think. We're not called to war. We're called to worship. We're not called to war. We're called to worship. And in worship, God begins to seem bigger in our minds and in our eyes, because no matter the size of the problem, we have a bigger God. Paul will write, our struggle is not against blood and flesh, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers of this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Our battle is not with governments or corporations or unions. Our battle is with the forces of evil, and is fought on our knees in worship as we pray and fast and wait upon the Lord. These are our weapons, and best of all, we know the end of the story. Jesus wins. He always wins. So what does all of this have to do with our vision? Joining Jesus is more than just a phrase that kind of sounds cool. It really is the heart and soul of what we're trying to do and who we're trying to be. Joining Jesus in the renewal of all things. We want to see God's kingdom come. We want to see his will be done right here in heaven, in earth, the way it is in heaven. We want to align ourselves with whatever Jesus is doing in making all things new so that we can participate in what he's up to. And that means that we don't always know what's next, but we certainly can plan for it, and have been building capacity a little bit to make sure that we can be ready for what he asks us to do. 2 years ago, we began this journey of thinking this way and had 3 areas that we have been trying to increase our capacity in. The first one we simply called formation, referring to a discipleship pathway that was clear and effective. Because disciples, apprentices of Jesus, his followers, we need to become disciples who actually make disciples. We need to become disciples who make disciples. And so this past year, we've been clarifying what we call our first steps, A, B, C, D. This will be interesting for me. What does A stand for? Oh, Somebody's getting it right. This side of the room were amazing last night. Every single question first answered. These people over here, not so much. I told them they need to pray harder. Alpha, she got it right. Alpha's a great place to start. If you've already taken it, you know why it's a great place to start. That means it's also a great place to bring a friend and hear the story of Jesus and how he can transform lives. A is for Alpha. B is for baptism. Oh, wow, we're getting it all from all sides now. Baptism. And we've got those wonderful baptism services next weekend where we're going to celebrate the new life that Jesus gives. C, catechism, classes, all sorts of classes. In particular, we've been putting a lot of effort into one that we've called catechism, a practice of the church through many generations that helps us not just grow in our understanding, but helps us grow in a life that's lived honoring God, resembling Jesus as he works in us. The topics of our catechism class include beginning with Christ, the gospel, and then believing in Christ as we look at the Apostles' Creed, belonging to Christ as we work our way through the Lord's Prayer carefully, becoming like Christ, paying attention to the 10 Commandments and the Sermon on the Mount. Our first prototype classes were held this past October with around 20 participants, and the plan is that we ramp this up significantly in the year ahead. Letter D, discipleship bands. Well done. Some people have very good memories around here. I'm actually encouraged at how many of you are already participating in a discipleship band. Thank you for doing that. Some of you probably have little clue what I'm talking about, but I'll explain more later, I suppose. Discipleship bands are a great way to get to know people and to be known by people, and most of all, to build accountability into our lives. 3 to 5 people who gather together weekly when they can and just answer 5 simple questions, and then they pray for each other. That's it. It's a highlight of my week. It's my Wednesday evening, as many Wednesdays as it's possible for me to do that, with some very dear friends who know the truth about me, sometimes the ugly truth. They love me anyway and pray for me despite it. It's a place where my heart is challenged to follow Jesus and to surrender all of me to him. It's a place where I can learn to grow, to be a follower and disciple of Jesus. If you feel stuck in your spiritual journey, or you've got a friend who does, I'd encourage you to start on this first steps pathway, ABCD. You don't necessarily have to follow it in linear order. That's not the point. What does matter, though, is that we engage in all 4 steps because they become so significant in the building of a life of a disciple who can make a disciple of others. And if you feel stuck, why don't you start? If you feel a little lost, this is a great place to know people because it'll be a much smaller crowd of people than in this room right now. You've been praying for a friend that you want to introduce to Jesus and you don't know where to start with A, bring them to Alpha. Believe it or not, most studies would show that the vast majority of people, up to 90% of people, if you ask them and offer to bring them and come with them, they'll say yes. They'll say yes. We just need to make the ask. That was formation. The second one we call vocation, nice rhyming words. It's really about developing a Christ-centered leaders inside of our community, a pipeline, if you like, that could serve people both inside and outside the church. A leadership pipeline to discover not only what our spiritual gifts are, but what is your divine calling? What has God called you to be or to do? What would that look like in your life? Do you know what your calling is? If you really are joining Jesus, do you know what your role is? What he's asking you to do? For some, that sense of calling might be a new career. That's my story. I wasn't always a pastor. My first career was as a corporate and international tax consultant with EY. I loved what I did. But sensing God's call meant a whole change of direction for me, for my family, my wife and our little baby boy. We only had one at the time. And maybe that is you. There's a sense of God tugging at your heart. I'd love to talk with you. Somebody came and talked with me last night. Come talk to me. I'd love to have the conversation. I'd love to hear your story. Most of us, though, will probably continue in the careers we already have, sharing the good news of Jesus right where he's placed us, with people we've been building relationships with, where we can serve and do things for the good of our city, for the benefit of everybody. Where excelling at our job doesn't just make us feel good, we realize we're making a contribution to the world in which we live. We need you to do that and to do it well. God's placed you there for a reason. This past year, we ran a couple of evenings that we called Called or Curious. We didn't really advertise it, mentioned it once or twice in a sermon, and that's all there was. But we had 90 participants who had come to explore one question really: is God calling me to something specifically, and what would that look like? Even as going as far as vocational ministry, what would that look like? Most of these people are now in the process of being partnered with a pastor to mentor them in the leadership journey that they're on. Some have engaged in a program that we've called Pathways into Ministry. Around 20 people are part of it, a pilot project that we're running in conjunction with Ambrose University and Seminary, right here in the Deerfoot campus, upstairs at the south end. We've been running classes on Monday evening that are available for university credit and available to help you get ready for a vocational life of ministry if that's what God's calling you to. And if it's just you want to learn, that's possible too. We provide the courses in an easy format here and at a way reduced cost. But what we mostly do are trying to learn how to find ways to surround learning with being a worshiping, discipling community, where we're learning how to be a disciple, not just learning a ton of stuff about the Bible, where we're learning how to do the hard work of ministry and leadership, not just writing down or drawing diagrams about it. The class began this year with an intro to the Bible, and in January we'll come back with an intro to theology. The idea is that we eventually can become a citywide hub for theological education that's conducted inside a church family, inside this lived community, much more than in isolation from it. We hope to ramp this up and go at a large scale in the fall of 2026. Formation, vocation, and then comes multiplication. Expanding our missional skill set. Because God has uniquely shaped each one of us. And we learn to work together. And in learning to work together, we can expand our knowledge base and our experiences and the things that we know how to do and not to do. Because we want to be ready for whatever it is Jesus asked us to do. And not go, duh. We want to be ready for that. We can learn. And I know it's not all up to us. I'm not daft. But I also know that God gives us gifts and we need to learn how to steward them well and be ready to use them. We began our journey of this thinking in 2023 with a dream of 10 new expressions of FAC within 10 years. Why 10 years? What happens in 2033? Nobody knew this one last night either. 2033. With the 2,000 years, more or less, as best you can tell, 2,000 years since Jesus rose from the dead and walked out of that grave in Jerusalem. 2,000 years. It would be a big celebration, I think, for churches around the world. And our 10 new expressions are the gift that we want to give to Jesus that day, to celebrate what he's doing. There are things that we have learned how to do well over time. Gathering in multiple services, church planting, becoming both multicultural and multilingual as a church family, sending international workers overseas, short-term teams, growing multiple campuses, even adopting another church. We've been learning a lot. This past month in October, we celebrated the anniversary of a number of our campuses. Southwest, 6 years. Espanol, 3 years. Portuguese, 1 year. The first of our new ventures in the timeline we had was the launch of FAC in Portuguese last year. We adopted 2 or 3 church. And we're carefully and prayerfully looking at a number of other possibilities in Calgary and beyond. Because we want to discern clearly, what is Jesus asking us to do? We know what some of the opportunities are. We could do a bunch of things here in the Deerfoot facility. We have a 3rd floor that's as present, unused and undeveloped that we could expand out. We could do something there, or we could expand out the current gymnasium, or we could build something out on the far south of the property. There's a bunch of things we could think about. We could focus on additional communities in the city of Calgary that are underserved with gospel presence. We've identified some of them. We already come alongside a number of schools, doing things to help, taking care of the property, refreshing things out, investing in giving things to the kids, getting them ready for school and spending time with them. Could we develop our partnerships further? Some of the places that are least served right now with the gospel message are the resort communities in southern Alberta, places like Canmore and Banff. They're not easy places to work in because, 90% of the population, something like that, leaves every year. Most people speak Australian when they're there, and then they disappear, and more come back. You'd never grow a big church there, but you would have a church of remarkable influence that's sending people on every single year. Could we do that? Our online campus, Corey, he was there. I can't see if he's still there. It's too dark. Our online campus has come across a number of remarkable opportunities of people who started watching our services online for who knows what reason. But they've been finding Jesus. People have been surrendering their lives to him. They were asking us how to baptize them. They've been baptizing. They're celebrating the Lord's Supper. They're tuning into what we do. They're following their curriculum. The only thing they've ever asked us for is Bibles and to pray for them. I looked at my Facebook this morning. I had an invitation to join FAC Uganda. What? I don't know what this really means, but for the moment, we get to celebrate with people. Or just make it real personal. What if we could have presence in different parts of our city? What if we could be the first Christians to move into a brand new community and be there to welcome everybody that shows up? What if we would take the radical step of selling the house you already own so you could move into a brand new community to be the first person there that would tell people about Jesus? What if we could, those who work downtown, could start having lunch together and inviting other people to do that and have a conversation about Jesus? What if we could find a place to launch a language school or provide after-school care? What if we personally could welcome new Canadians into our home and help them perhaps with learning to drive or with medical terminology or getting their taxes done or just simply being in the house of somebody who cares for them? The possibilities are probably endless, which is why we desperately want to prayerfully discern what it is that Jesus is asking us to do so that we join him in the renewal of all things. Let me go back to Joshua and the commander for just a moment. Look up and behold. It means, in this context, I think, looking up to see what Jesus is already doing. There's lots of it in the annual report. You can hear more tomorrow evening at the AGM if you want to come. Dave already mentioned to us this morning our As One gathering in the month of June. All 5 campuses gathering at Spruce Meadows together to worship together, with 4,603 people gathered together from our church to celebrate Jesus. There's the completion of the Southwest Campus Ministry Centre right across the road from GCA. The top floor of a building that we use there has been completely renovated out. It's more than doubled the available space to us for during the week activities there. Our brand new website came on stream, I think, just over a week ago. Same address, feccalgary.com, but a brand new look and easier to navigate. We've now begun streaming with a solid stream. Last week was the first successful solid stream of our Portuguese services online on a separate YouTube channel. We've seen significant growth in our weekend service attendance, not only through the past ministry year, but a growth that has gone exponential in this current fall. Our youth ministry is getting so big they need so many buses to get around places. 230 people took Alpha last year. 162 took it in the last semester. Look up. Jesus is doing amazing things. We can learn to fall down and surrender, I think, too, like Joshua, to surrender our lives to whatever Jesus would ask. 29 people took the time and spent their money to go on a short-term mission trip to learn to see what Jesus is doing in other places and to ask themselves that question, Jesus, what can I do? 39 people completed an unfinished story missions course, discovering what it would mean to truly surrender their life to him. 98 children said yes to Jesus for the very first time in Discovery Land, surrendering a young life to him. 110 people were baptized publicly, confirming their faith in Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. 20 people gather every Monday night with me, discerning their future as they prayerfully consider vocational ministry. Next weekend is our big baptism weekend, where we can learn to take this one single step of surrender that says, Jesus, I'm yours, whatever it is you're asking. Like Joshua, we can fall down and surrender. And then there's this whole shoes off business about worship. You see that our FEC music people have a passion for music that inspires worship. We want to resource you and engage you in that. We now have 15 music teams across all campuses. They released a new album this year, Every Voice. 100 students are enrolled in our School of Music. Meeting Place 4 upstairs has become a new rehearsal and recording space. Fill the Room, those Sunday evening events that we love to gather and sing, has had its first Spanish expression this year. But worship, we know, is more than music. There's other arts as well. Our artists produced an Objects of Grace exhibit last year during Lent. That huge crown of thorns that we had up here on Good Friday. You may have noticed the gallery that we have out on Main Street on both floors at the fireplaces. Art that's made by people here. Remember Jesus' words about doing things for the least of these? When we do it for the least of them, we did it for him. That's how we worship. 1,400 families were served through the food bank, through our community resource centre this past year. 1,400 families. 350 backpacks were given to kids that wouldn't have had their supplies ready for school had we not taken the time to do it. 120 people in one of the schools are part of our breakfast store. We want to learn to worship Jesus in every aspect of our lives, not just when we gather together. I often put it like this when I'm trying to help people understand it and ask them, are you all in? Like the banners say on Main Street, all praying, all helping, all giving. What does all in mean? It means that we are all praying personally, in our homes, in our workplace, with our families, but praying in our groups, praying in our ministry areas, corporate prayer gatherings that we have here on some of our facilities, worship events and more. Are you a person who prays? Not just when you're desperate, but who seeks God's face. All helping, because we all have a role to play. It always feels really nice when somebody walks up to you when you're doing something and says, can I help? Imagine if we could ask that question all the time to everybody we meet. How can I help? And all giving of our time and our experiences, and yes, of our money too, because we freely give to the one who freely gave to us. Is that you? Are you all in? Are you? Can you imagine what might happen in our city if we chose to truly be all in for Jesus? If we were joining Jesus in the renewal of all things, what would happen? Revelation 21, we read these words. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, see, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them. They will be his peoples, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more, for the first things have passed away. And the one who was seated on the throne, Jesus, said, see, I am making all things new. And he said, write this, for these words are trustworthy and true. That quite simply is our vision. Joining Jesus in the renewal of all things. And why? Because he's worthy. Simply worthy.